Welcome back to the Science and Spirituality podcast. And today's topic is understanding who you really are and knowing who you really are. We got some interesting concepts to throw at your brain today.
Hmm.
So, Chris, I wanted you to start what you were just telling me before we started the recording. Like you got like super lit about it. I want you to begin
Yeah.
there. Like just dive in the deep end.
Yeah. So, this happens to me a lot in my life. What I'm about to say is sometimes we'll do things over and over again for the course of like months or even the course of a few years, depending on how old you are. And we get into these patterns of behavior, whether it's good patterns or whether it's bad patterns, whether it's like feeling depressed or feeling anxious or feeling stuck or feeling like you're really excelling at life. And a lot of times we tend to think that these habits and these patterns that we get into are who we are. So, like a personal example for myself, like there'll be weeks at a time where I'll feel very anxious. And if I'm not careful, I'll make the mistake of thinking that, oh, like this anxiety is who I am. But really, it's just patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior that I'm placing my energy into that's making me feel like I'm that kind of person. So what I wanted to get into on this episode is talking about, and what you opened with in the episode, the episode of who we truly are. Who we truly are, or what we truly are, is energy. It's this consciousness that is being placed into certain thoughts and certain behaviors that create this personality of the person that we are.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's really important to distinguish, because I know for me, if I'm not aware or if I forget about that fact, I I don't know, sometimes I feel like a bad person
Yeah.
because of the patterns I have sometimes, and because of the things that I'm not doing. And I feel like, oh, maybe this is just who I am, but it's not. I'm more, I have more substance than that, and we all do. We all have more substance than that. We're deeper beings than that.
Exactly. And it goes back to like the manifestation of what we're talking about here comes into the choice that we all have, which is the last episode that we released on the Science and Spirituality podcast, that you always have a choice. But what you're talking about here and what we want to really get across is that you have to get to know who you really are as a spiritual being in order to be conscious of that choice in any given situation. Like you're sharing, like if you feel anxious for a certain amount of time, like you can think, I am an anxious person, but it's like you're choosing that thought, I am an anxious person. Now it's, you could deny the power that that pattern has over you. I mean, obviously you're not going to say like I'm not an anxious person, or not going to say let me clarify, you're not going to say that I don't have anxiety even when you're experiencing it. Like that's not the way to transform and release and repattern uh, things in our lives that we want to change. But it is the key of knowing that you are more powerful than those patterns because you
Hmm.
created them. They may
Hmm.
feel like they're more powerful because they've have been there for weeks, months, years, but ultimately we create them. So in once we understand and recognize and really ground and feel ourselves as that spiritual being, then there's a liberation. There's a liberated feeling. Like even if we do, and it's there's a level of compassion you need to have for yourself when you're working on changing a pattern or a habit, because you do fall back in. It's not going to be like clear cut, and like once you like release it once, it's going to be gone. It's something you have to continue to release. But the choice is always there. The power is
Hmm.
always there, but only the power is only there when we're connected with our source of who we really are, as like you said, energy, as a
Yeah.
spirit, as a being that is beyond the physical. That's what spiritual being means, or metaphysics. Like it's beyond the physics, it's beyond the form. And we we know this on a subconscious level because we never say I am thought. Like we say I have thoughts.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
It's possession. I mean that's the clearest way I can think of and way of describing it, and it's black and white in my head. It's like once I
Hmm.
say like I have thoughts, then that proves that I'm not my thoughts. And to say I have my body, I have a body. Like I don't say I am hand. Like it's
Yeah.
again, it's possession. Like I have this, I have that. So that means the I what we're talking about here, the I is the spiritual nature. It's the transcendent self. And we all have the capability of tapping into that. It takes time, it takes practice, but um, it's worth it to really
Yeah,
go
and
deep
it
into that.
also it also takes I think at the first step is the awareness. I think that
Oh yeah.
the first step to a lot of things, especially in transformation, especially in change, is awareness.
Hmm.
Because you can't fix something or you can't work to improve something that you don't know is wrong in the first place.
Yep.
So shining light on those areas is the biggest thing, and I think that's what that trips up a lot of people, because sometimes it's difficult to look at yourself and it's difficult to look at the things that you don't like about yourself,
Hmm.
because then once you look at them you have to go to that place of pain, and then from that place of pain that's where you need to change.
Hmm.
I just want to go back to the spiritual being idea that we
Hmm.
were talking about, to give an illustration of the way that I view it in my head, and maybe it'll help some of our listeners.
Do it.
I view, like, when you're born as a human, you're like this vast ocean of water. So let's say that's like you're like a big vast ocean of water, and that's your energy. And then as you go through life, your experiences, your habits, everything you go through creates rivers that the water comes down. So like when you meet someone, they look like this huge like web of rivers, but the water that's in those rivers what is the same water as when you were born. It's
Mm,
like it's pure, and you can work to create new rivers that water will flow down. And you can like create a new person, create new habits, but that original energy is always the same.
mm,
So that's like the way that I illustrate it and I view it in my head.
mm.
um so I don't know if that helps anyone, but that's the way I like to
Y-
yeah.
I've heard you share that before, but I don't know why, but it just really landed for me. Like when you just explained that again, because I'm sure you've heard the phrase like being a channel
Mm,
for good, or being a channel of like divine energy or things like that, where you're just like you're like a conduit. That's another phrase or a word that I've heard used, that we're conduits for like universal energy. Like it perfectly fits into what you're sharing. Is like that the pure, like the water is the pure essence of like who we are, is like our spiritual nature, and then like we carve out these like rivers, the way for our, or that energy to flow down.
yeah. And
I-
the
Go ahead.
and the water flow, like the water flowing is the patches of time. It's like
Mm,
you can't stop it from flowing. And
mhm.
so if you're stuck in a, let's say, a negative habit pattern, the water is going to continually flow down that same river.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to dig new rivers so that the water has a new place to flow.
Yep.
You like stopping your life and halting and like thinking about it for weeks, is like, if you stay in the same patterns, like the water flows. You can't
Yeah.
stop the water from flowing. You can only choose where it's going to flow.
Yeah. And that gives a like a really beautiful image when I'm thinking of like that, like in terms of changing the habit, like you said, like dig a new channel, like that's some work.
Mm.
Like, and it's challenging, but what's going to be harder? Staying in your negativity and old patterns that aren't serving you, which are just causing you just pain and misery, or the pain of just doing the work of digging new channels, which in like real life, what that means is in those moments when you're tempted to think negative thoughts, or tempted to just play out a whole scenario of unpleasant emotions, and just you're not being aware and choosing not to, like maybe the thought comes like, oh, like my thoughts are powerful, like I should be positive, but then you're like, no, like it's easier to be negative because this person did this to me. Like it's in those moments, that's the work, that's the digging up the new channel. And like one like like I don't even know what to call it, like one dig of your shovel, like one like press into the ground with your shovel, is like a new one thought that you really ground in. Like you, like when you think that thought, it's not like you're just trying to like blanket over like all the negativity. Like you're actually working on feeling the feeling of what it's like to believe that new positive thought that you have about yourself. And that's one shovel, like that's one scoop of dirt,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot of work to be done,
Yeah.
but you can be guaranteed it's the only way to
And
change.
then yeah, and then sticking with the river example, like when you start digging that new river, the water's not going to automatically divert to that until you dig enough of you dig it deep enough and long enough that the water will divert.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like the flow is still too strong and it's going to stay in that one river path, which could be your negative habits, until you build another one where it can flow through.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And then I also just wanted to mention too, just another theme of this episode, or just this idea, is that whoever's listening to this right now, like, you're not broken.
Mm,
Like, it's not like you're just inherently a flawed, like, human. It's like, no, you might just have a few bad patterns. That's it. Like, it's just, you might have a few bad patterns of behavior that you need to reframe and reprogram. But who you are underneath all of that, you're not a flawed person. There's nothing wrong with you. And I think hearing that is kind of nice, especially in a world today where, everyone's diagnosed with something and everyone feels like there's something wrong with them and everyone
yeah.
feels like they need something to be successful, or they need something to feel like this, or whatever it is. They need to gain 5 pounds, lose 10 pounds, look this way, or whatever, So it's just, we're not broken. They're
Yeah.
just it's just some of our patterns just need to be fixed. And when you look at it that way, it kind of gives you a practical blueprint to become better, because you can start to kind of reverse engineer your life into patterns. You can be like, oh, I'm this way. There's these results are in my life because I'm doing X, Y, and Z every day. So if I do A, B, and C every day instead of X, Y, and Z, I'll end up in a new place.
Yep.
I'll have a new outcome because I've changed my patterns.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a level of just discipline that needs to come with that. Because like, going back to the analogy of like digging that new channel, it takes work. But if you don't see the physical results or like the tangible results where like you feel better and you've been digging that new trench, like for the new thoughts to flow down in a way that's more positive and more uplifting for you, it's not going to be immediate. So like it takes time, and that's where people, I think, mess up the most, is like if things don't change drastically in 1 month, they think that it's not working.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, it will, it's inevitable. Like you do this, it will change. Like there's science behind this. Like I'm thinking of neuroplasticity in my
Yeah. I
mind
was
right
thinking
now
about
because
that
I'm,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's exactly in alignment with the analogy of like digging a new like way for the river to flow. Like it you can guarantee, like it's proven by science now, that as you think different thoughts, then your neurons start to change how they're wired together in your brain, which makes it
Yeah.
makes it later on then easier to think those thoughts.
And then I think we're going to the neuroplasticity. It's also important not to just install new habit patterns, but then take your energy off of the old habit patterns, because as you stop those old habits, the connections in your brain from those old habits will eventually start to deteriorate.
Yeah,
But if you're doing good habits and you're also continuing to do your bad habits, they'll both get reinforced.
exactly.
It'll just take longer. Do
Yeah,
you know what I
way
mean?
longer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No,
And
so that was yeah.
yeah, and one thing I also want to highlight, because going back to like the real like the underlying theme of this, is that like you said, like you're not broken. You're like just understanding who you really are, is you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your habits or patterns. It's just coming back to who you really are as a spiritual being. That it like once you learn to tap into that side of yourself, because there is two sides, like the spiritual nature, that's who you really are, but then you also have your human nature. But learning to tap into our spiritual nature in any given moment is one of the biggest keys, and that you can use to change your life. Because I'm sure people listening to this, if they're listening to this, they probably have a history of wanting to change their life, but sometimes, or a lot of times, it's not sustained, and so people give up. um, and that sustained sustaining a new habit and creating a new habit takes rigor and takes focus and energy. But it's easy to give up when you think that you have to do it alone, or that like you're just this human being that's trying to change. But like when you remember that you are a spiritual being, that you are pure energy, that you are not limited by your past, or your past history, your thoughts, your feelings. You're born anew every single moment of the day when you choose to. And so coming back to that truth that you're more than all the things that have ever happened in your life, and you will be more than anything that will ever happen in your life, then you could tap into that potential, that true deep potential that we are all born with, that we were before we were even born, and we will
Mhm.
still be after we pass away. We're the energy. And so when we tap into that and really come from that place, and allow it to flow through us, then overcoming these old habits and patterns becomes easy, becomes cake. As in, you're very aware enough to make the quote unquote harder decision to delay gratification and to change the pattern. Mic drop.
Yeah.
It's in one final. I know, because I want to hear your thoughts on that, or if there's anything else that you wanted to share. But like, that topic of just the spiritual being, like, it's so interesting because you can never put words to it that would really fully suffice what we're actually talking about, because words are of the physical realm. So it's not spirit. It's not like, how would I put this? See, I'm already tripping up with the words, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, like, how to explain it. So I hope that what I shared before was clear enough to get, um, because everyone has a different way of explaining it, and it's all one same truth.
Yeah, and I think if people are maybe hearing that for the first time, or maybe that's a that's their third or fourth exposure to it, if they've listened to every episode of this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I think there comes a point, because I mean, I understand what you're saying,
True.
because I mean, I've heard it before, and I've also like felt it before, and maybe like meditations, or when I was like super happy, or like just thinking about like when you really like sit and think about that idea of like when you have a thought, it's like, holy crap, like I'm observing the thought. So if I'm not that thought, then what am I, right?
Yeah.
I think it kind of takes everyone needs to build their own relationship to it, because it really is hard to put into words.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Because it's an experience. It's not
yeah,
something that can be described.
yeah,
It's kind of like, when I think of an analogy, it's like, well, I could try to tell you what a banana tastes like, but you got to just take the bite, bro. Like, you can never describe what something tastes like fully.
I guess that's true. I never thought about it that way.
The way you said that, I don't know. I was like, I never thought
uh,
about it that way, like something like that.
yeah, I think my nose is a little stuffy.
Okay, it wasn't intentional.
No,
Got it.
word.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but
that's my 2 cents. Like, I mean, I
yeah,
feel like I would just go around in circles saying the same thing in just maybe different ways. If we continue to talk about it, it's quite straightforward, really. Like, once you like nail the concept, it's like, all right, now how to apply it.
yeah,
It's in this
we,
scenarios
we,
that come up in your life.
yeah. We can probably dive into that on another episode. I
What
think
specifically?
how to like apply it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
be
or not.
interesting.
I mean, I'm still figuring it out. No,
Yeah.
seriously, like the reason the reason I wanted to talk about this topic on the episode is because like the last like couple of days I've been like really going through it, like really
Mm,
like stuck in my head, and I'm like, yo, like all this is just patterns of thinking. Like
yeah.
this is not just, it's not who I am. I'm not reserved to this fate. It's just patterns I need to fix.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel better when I think about that, and I think more people need to realize that, because I don't know, I just don't want you to think anything's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's way too easy, because I mean, there's not a lot of actually, there's tons of more information about like this kind of stuff we're talking about and support, but it's still not like widely spread. Like, I have a concept of like, oh, there's a ton of it, because like I tailor my news feeds on social media to like positivity. So like, I know, like, and I recognize like the abundance of like this information out there, but still, like, the world needs it. Like,
Yeah.
the reason why it's starting to proliferate more is because people are hungry for it.
Hmm.
So yeah, hope
All right. That
hope
was a good
our
episode.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I hope our information just helps. That's the key of just like raising consciousness, and like, so we all want the same thing, just to feel better and like live a happy, healthy, wealthy life,
Hmm.
just in our own forms of it. But honestly, like, even that, like, I mean, the happiness comes from within always, and that is like when you understand and know who you really are,
Yeah.
because then you can apply it. All right. Just like going off on like just mental tangents. So we can end it there. It's keeping it around like maybe 20 minutes or so. Yeah, if you like the podcast, listen to others. There's tons of great information here. Like, what are we at? 11 episodes?
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll find out in like about 10 seconds when you look it up. Anyway, it was good talking. Great episode, and we'll see y'all in the next one.
Peace.
And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton
and at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.